Hi, hello, and welcome. I'm definitely not yapping, and we're going to talk about some undermined development notes. So these are the notes, the patch notes for the PTR, but basically this is season 2 as it comes out. So we're going to talk about specifically how tanking is going to change in season 2, if it will change. Now, in my opinion, not really. It's not a spec thing. It's more of a dungeon tuning thing and general design when it comes to how damage is being done to players that has to change for tanks to start feeling different. So we're not going to glean that from these patch notes. As we get more patch notes about maybe dungeon balancing changes and stuff like that, we will find out more. Those aren't in here if I'm not mistaken. So I think we could just focus on what the changes are to tanks. I'm not going to cover each individual change like each of these notes. That doesn't matter to me, because I've done that a few times and I've run myself ragged trying to read all of these notes, and then it's like a 2-hour video and it's just pointless. What we are going to talk about is how does it change the gameplay of the individual specs. So for Death Knight, blood is not being affected at all. We can completely ignore that. Demon Hunter, there's basically 3 changes that affect Demon Hunter tanks, Vengeance Demon Hunters. The first is for hero talents, Fellscar Demon Surge now deals reduced damage beyond 8 targets. That is just a little nerf to your AoE on very big pulls. 8 targets, usually you don't have more than 8 targets that need to really be focused down. There's sometimes very small targets or small enemies in a pull that will just, it'll be fine. I don't think this is a huge nerf, but it is a nerf. Now, Vengeance, it says Demon Spike's duration increased to 8 seconds, was 6 seconds. Now, I might be wrong about this, but I do believe that this is just a reversion of the nerf that we saw with the War Within. I think it's huge. It's a nice increase in the uptime for demon spikes. It makes you less reliant on other cooldowns. Still reliant on them, but less reliant. So that's a welcome change. It gives you more uptime on defensives and leaves those vulnerability windows smaller. Now, Cycle of Binding effect is now triggered by Sigil of Flame, was all sigil skills, and reduces sigil skill cooldowns by 5 seconds, was 2 seconds. Basically, Sigil of Flame is the only way for you to reduce the cooldown of sigils. Instead of using chains or misery or silence or whatever, you actually just use Sigil of Flame to lower the cooldown. Now, it lowers it by more. It lowers it by the equivalent of using 2.5 sigils. So 1 Sigil of Flame is worth 2.5 sigils worth of cooldowns, but you have 3 other sigils, so you could say that it's a nerf, but I think, excuse me, and my voice is just running out. I think this is equivalent-ish. Now, the issue does arise that you don't have as much CDR, but I think it ends up being about the same. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not a Vengeance Demon Hunter player, but I am familiar with them, having run with them a whole bunch. But I think this is really cool. This part, the Demon Spikes, is really cool. This is an adjustment. I don't know how big of a deal that is. It sort of lets you really prioritize what you're going to use your other sigils on instead of using them just for the CDR. And it also incentivizes you maybe to use them more often instead of using them for CDR. I don't know. Again, Vengeance Demon Hunters, let us know in the comments how big of a change this is for you. And we're going to move on to Guardian Druid. Guardian Druid has a lot of changes. Druid in general has a lot of changes. The key thing here is your frenzied regen is going to be changed quite a bit. Now, reinvigoration, instead of lowering the cooldown of frenzied regeneration, it actually is going to make it last for 1 or 2 seconds longer, depending on 1 or 2 points in the thingy thing with the stuff in the talent. And rejuvenation and regrowth are being cast at you when you use frenzied regeneration at 100 or 200% effectiveness. So a good big old chunky heal. I think this is a nice change. Uptime wise, losing the cooldown and gaining the duration, you end up at about the same. And then there's this to increase its effectiveness. Basically, this you get more healing out of it overall. I don't know how much this, even at 200%, is going to affect the actual healing. We'll see as we get more information, as we actually try these things out. That's definitely one change. Another big change is Ursul's Warning. Gain magical damage reduction equal to 5 to 10% of your damage reduction from armor, depending on how many points you put on it. I think this is wonderful. This has me actually excited to play Guardian Druid, because first of all, I love Guardian Druid. Second of all, this is just a huge buff, honestly, in my opinion. Even though it's only 10% of your armor, damage reduction, it's actually still a huge amount, because it's a whole lot more than 0 when it comes to magic, right? So this is very powerful. It also turns Iron Fur into a actual magic defensive. So you can stack a bunch of you can stack a bunch of iron for a magic damage ability, and it's still going to actually affect it. So this is very, very powerful, and I think this is going to maybe even need some tuning down from this. Maybe it needs some tuning up from it to make it really stand out and be powerful. But I think this is a massive damage, a massive buff to Guardian Druid, because you're going to be stacking iron for either way if you're doing content that's difficult enough. So this is just really good. These changes are sort of inconsequential, but Raise now replaces Maul is a big one. You no longer have a specifically single target ability, for single target spender if you have Raise. I think it's nice. It reduces button bloat, but one thing where I don't know how important this is. Let me know if you play Guardian Druid, or if you just have an opinion about it. Basically, I think that it's kind of nice to have Maul for some prio damage. If you run the absorb shield from doing damage thing, Maul might be even better for you for certain situations, like when there's only one target. So maybe this needs to be paired with a sort of passive where if Raise only hits one target, it does more damage to sort of make up for the fact that Maul is no longer available. I don't know. Maybe that already exists. I haven't played Raise in a while. I've been playing some kind of weird build on the side. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about Raise replacing Maul. Also, Layered Main was removed. Layered Main used to give you 2 stacks of iron for randomly when you used one, and it also used to sometimes prevent, basically give you back a charge of frenzied regeneration. So that has been removed as a talent, which is okay with me considering the fact that you now have to spend talent points on other things such as Ursul's warding. There are some other changes to druids in general, I think that are pretty nice. For instance, adding symbiotic relationship, you form a bond. So basically, you healing yourself heals them, and them healing themselves heals you. So it's really nice. As a tank, this can be put on a squishy, and you can sort of, when you use Frenzied Regen to heal yourself a whole bunch, it'll help them. It's nice. Also, probably after the wildfire also affects them. So it's just a nice healing throughput sort of thing for Guardian Druids. That's it for Guardian Druid. Let's move on to the next one. The next one is 700 miles of Hunter patch notes. Let me just keep scrolling. Monk. Monk has no changes for Brewmaster. Absolutely no changes for Brewmaster. Kind of insane to me. Are they in a good spot? I don't think so. I haven't heard many people raving about how good Brewmaster is right now this season. So, let me know, Brewmasters. What would you like to see in these patch notes that isn't here right now? Let me know. Paladin, of course, is perfectly balanced, as all things should be. So there are no changes to protection other than basically a slight change where, as Templar, when you use Hammer of Light, it grants you Shield of the Righteous instead of applying Judgment to your enemies. So this is a damage nerf and a survivability buff because you gain Shield of the Righteous. The rest of it is unchanged. They just wanted to change that to make it more specific for protection. There's also some slight changes to the Paladin class overall, which is adjust reward. So cleansing someone successfully, the healing for it is increased, kind of a meh talent. Lightforged Blessing is now halved in its healing, which is a significant amount. Lightforged Blessing does heal quite a bit throughout an entire dungeon. It adds up quite quickly. You might think that 2% of your health is not much, but when you have 10 million health or more, that's 200k healing every time you smack Lightforged Blessing, right? Or am I stupid and doing the math wrong? Well, now it's only 100k. But it still adds up, so I think this is still worth grabbing. Seal of the Crusader apparently has also been reduced by 50%. This is when you auto attack, you do a certain amount of healing. It has been reduced by 50%. I don't know if if the talent was really strong and needed to be nerfed. I don't remember seeing it in any of the builds that I've run. So you guys let me know, is this something that I just don't know about being OP, or is it just a random nerf because they wanted to rebalance healing being provided? One note that it has nothing to do with tanking, but healing hands on Retribution is now only applies to the health of the Paladin casting it. So basically it's not something you can use to heal your friends with. You could just heal yourself. I hate that. I hate that more than more than anything, but that's besides the point. Let's move on to the next tank, which I do believe is Warrior. Yes, Warrior is the last tank we can talk about. So there's some changes to Warrior where the class tree in itself has some changes. So what they wanted to do was, hey, you guys are kind of squishy. Let's put the endurance training talent into reinforced plates and give you basically make sure that you take this because you always take reinforced plates. So they're basically giving you a nice little buff because you will always take reinforced plates, because there's another talent that makes you take gives you strength equal to armor gained. So increasing your armor gain increases your strength. So reinforced plates is now a 2-point talent and grants 5% stamina and 5% armor per point. It used to just be armor, so this is a nice big buff. I think they also turned it into a 2-point thing and changed Overwhelming Rage to a 1-point talent, so your talent economy stays the same. They also didn't give you an extra point in the last part. They increased the weapon specialization, so dual wield, two-handed, one-handed, all of it is increased to a 2-point. It slightly buffs them as well. They go from 5% damage to 6%. I believe that was the case for all of them, and you get different bonuses depending on your spec. Arms gets 2% basically avoidance, Fury gets 2% movement speed, and Protection gets 2% leech per point, so 4% of each of those for the respective specializations. They also have slightly nerfed Thunderous Words, which I don't know how necessary that was. Maybe it was very powerful and this was a way to just address the sort of damage that we see from the burstiness. But protection, okay, so developers notes, protection warriors are I don't like these changes all that much, but let's just read what they are. Protection warriors are currently constantly flooded with rage, which undermines rotational defensive decision making and encourages constant dumping of rage into ignore pain to maximize effectiveness. We're taking a pass at reducing protection's overall rage generation to make decisions on when and how to spend it more meaningful without reducing protection warriors' ability to tank effectively. So the last time they had this kind of wording, we were all worried and ended up being correct about it. They've reduced they've increased how much tanks take damage, but kept the same amount of deaths for the tanks, but it ended up being just wrong, which is the tank nerfs that we talked about. But on the more optimistic note, let's see what they did to do this. So they reduced, in a bunch of ways, they've reduced how much rage you generate. So bonus rage generation. Another key one is chance to reset the cooldown of Shield Slam from Devastator and Strategist. Reduced to 20% was 30%. So that's big. Fewer shield slams means less rage, means less ignore pain spam. But what did they do to compensate us for this, to make this statement true, right? To make it so that we don't die as much. What they did was they gave us a cooldown reduction on shield wall, and they gave us an amount of damage ignored for each use of ignore pain is increased by 30%. So their guesstimation is that with this reduced amount of rage, we need 30% more from each ignore pain to make it worth pressing to make it not feel horrible to press that button. And also, they think we need a lower cooldown on shield wall. And I agree with the shield wall for sure, because you're going to get fewer shield slams because you're getting this reset less often. So with shield slam lowering the cooldown of your shield wall, you're going to need that cooldown to be lower in order to get it as often as you did before while getting fewer shield slams in, if that makes sense. And the amount of damage ignored for each use of ignore pain is increased by 30%. So basically they're saying you're going to use ignore pain 30% less often because we're giving you less rage to spend on it, but it's going to give you just as much as it did before. Now, for an ability that's off the global cooldown, I don't think they needed this. I don't think this was necessary. You just added more cognitive load to a tank for no reason. You're forcing them to make a choice between shield block and ignore pain, or maybe a revenge here and there. But was this necessary? Were warriors like, oh, this is so boring, I'm just spamming ignore pain, I don't have to think at all? It's like, no, you're focusing on many other things, such as keeping the mobs grouped and such. So do you need more cognitive load to make your spec fun? I disagree. What do you guys think? Let me know. And then there's Colossus. Colossal Might is no longer applied by Execute. This is protection specific. Developers notes, using your hard-hitting rotational ability regularly is core to the Colossus gameplay style. And Execute applying Colossal Might pushed Colossus away from that during Execute phases. So what they're saying is, basically, they want you to shield slam more and execute less in Execute phases. So they basically removed Colossal Might being applied by Execute. And I'm okay with this change. It felt awkward pressing execute as a protection warrior, so this might not be the worst change they've implemented. Was it necessary? Maybe. Maybe it's like extra cognitive, extra cognitive load. It also reduces the amount of cooldown reduction you get for your shield wall because you're pressing execute instead of shield slam. And we're talking about the global economy, right? This should also make you tankier because you're generating rage with shield slam instead of reducing the amount of rage you have by spending it on execute. So you'll have more rage left over for your defensive. So execute phases become a little bit safer for you because you're not using execute if you're playing Colossus. I don't know if Colossus is very popular. I think Mountain Thane is much more popular for protection right now. But if you guys play protection Colossus, let me know how you see this change. An issue causing Demolish's animation is not correctly play sometimes is now fixed. That's nice. It's a nice little bug fix that they added in. So these are the changes made to tanks. Is this enough to make tanks in Mythic Plus feel like they're having more fun? Is this enough to make pugs more fun? I don't think so. These are changes to gameplay. They don't seem to really make you all that more tanky. These changes to Protection Warrior definitely don't make you more tanky. In fact, they just it makes it more difficult to be just as tanky, in my opinion. The changes to the other tanks other than Guardian Druid have just been non-existent. Brewmaster didn't get anything. Protection Paladin didn't get anything. Vengeance Demon Hunter didn't get anything. Guardian Druid, however, is getting a sort of like class, sort of not a rework, just a slight rework to a couple of abilities like we talked about. That could make it more interesting to play. Will it make it much more viable? I don't know. The buff, sorry, I'm just trying to find, there's so many patch notes, Jesus. All right, Death Knight didn't get any changes to Blood, and I'm pretty sure people aren't super happy with how Blood is working right now. But yeah, the changes to Guardian Druid, this specifically Ursol's Warding, I consider this to be enough to push this tank up quite a bit with tank survivability. Wondering now whether or not this will actually make it viable. I don't think so, because Prot Paladin has probably still more survivability. It has more interrupts. It has Bubble, which is freaking incredible. Let's not forget that. I think it just has too much still over the Guardian Druid to be considered like this to be considered a fix for what happened, for like a toss up in the meta. That's what I'm talking about. Now, that's my conclusion. What do you think? Personally, I think what needs to happen is a change in design philosophy and how damage is being dealt to tanks before we see any sort of enjoyment change as far as the role of tanking is concerned. Will this make tanking more fun? I don't think so. Will this make pugging more fun and finding tanks more easy? I don't think so. What needs to happen is a change to how dungeons treat tanks, because this is just a change to specs. It's not a change to tanking. That's my opinion. If you disagree, let me know. I'd love to know what you think. If you're just here to be bitter and shit on Blizzard, just pass, bro. Thanks for the engagement, but like I don't care about you being super salty, so just move on, please. But that's pretty much it. I've yapped for 20 minutes about tank changes coming in the Undermine. If you enjoyed it, drop a like. Let me know what you liked about it in a comment down below. If you had fun, make sure you subscribe because I'll be covering more patch notes in the future. But as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.